Okay, we've got that going. Let's start our recording. Wonderful. Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our weekly Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations from those with power to share. My name is Amy Vaughan, and I am the owner and Chief Empowerment Officer of Together Digital, a diverse and collaborative community of women who work in digital and choose to share their knowledge, power, and connections. You can join the movement and learn more about us at www.togetherindigital.com. Today, we are here to discuss how to help your business thrive, not just during economic uncertainty, but across the board. And we're here today with Managing Director at MiQ, Samantha Zurek. She is the advertising industry. She is an advertising industry veteran with 17 years of experience across many disciplines, including linear television, digital publisher direct, DSP, DMB, mobile SSP, television ACR, technology and data, and analytics specialties. Currently, Sam is the Managing Director of MiQ, the global programmatic media partner overseeing 9 offices in the Midwest and the West regions across all commercial and operational organizations. Sam, thanks for being here with us today, and happy Friday.
Thank you so much. And I'm so sorry there were so many acronyms in that bio. I'm sure that most people have no idea what any of those are. So apologies.
No worries. And my dyslexia was like kicking in hard with them. I was like, come on, Amy, you can do this. But it's Friday. I've got a little bit of Friday brain. Weather's beautiful. So nonetheless, excited to be here with you to have this conversation. You have sat on some panels with us before in the past for some of our past events. And, I've just always been so impressed by every single woman I've come across at MiQ. So obviously you're no exception, and it's great to have one of you all in the Power Lounge. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your career journey so far? Like, how did you get to this place, and how did you just get so wicked smart with all of those acronyms around your bio?
I was going to say, I'm going to really, really try not to use an acronym within this. So I think that, like, philosophically, my journey has always been about building my own jetpack. It's not about, doing the same job twice ever. I'm never going to do the same job twice. I'm never going to jump ship and go to a competitor because, kind of loses credibility, and I've already done it in some space. And so really, I think that, like, my curiosity has driven every single step that I've taken, and it's never been a step in the exact same direction. It's kind of been like a little bit of a stair step. Learn something new, master it, go to the next one. Learn something new, master it, go to the next one. And so, I started out my career in linear television, so working for TBS, TNT, and liked it, but there's not much you can do beyond like spots and dots and things like that on television. So I just kind of got bored pretty quickly. Went over to the digital side of things, loved it, and then realized that there was just so much technology behind advertising. And that was the time that demand side platforms / DSPs were launching. And it was like this whole new world of, like, how do you target individuals? How do you use technology to reach consumers? And I went in head first. And since then, it's kind of just been staying up with, like, what those next trends are. And, I moved to an ACR, TV data set company, because I knew TV, but I didn't know TV data set from like an automated content recognition, ACR. You guys are learning stuff. This is great.
Yeah.
Okay. So I didn't know any of that stuff. And so being able to kind of take those steps, be vulnerable, master it, have curiosity, have taken me every step I've gone. So I've actually been at MiQ going on 6 years at this point. And I think that was like the culmination of bringing a lot of stuff together, but in a really tech forward way. And again, still being able to master things one step at a time, because the industry is moving us along. So I don't even feel like I'm missing out on anything, because being at the forefront of that has allowed me to continue that innovation lens and growing my jetpack here at MiQ.
I love that analogy, building your own jetpack. That's amazing. That's such a good analogy and way to remember that you've got the opportunity to fuel it. I think a lot of us sit around and kind of wait for others to fill that jetpack with fuel, but really it's your desire to have that continuous learning and growth. And again, not even being linear in your growth path, but just, looking to what skills are you attuned to, what skills are you naturally good at, and following those. Because in a lot of ways, I know we're talking about not economy proofing your business, but helping it survive during uncertainty. Like, obviously there's a lot of us out there right now that are looking for work and or looking to make a pivot and feel a lot of uncertainty. So in a lot of ways, this is kind of economy proofing your career, your mindset, and the way that you've approached it. So wonderful first answer out of the gate. Again, no surprise. All of you ladies at MiQ are always so brilliant.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Of course, of course. So as managing director, what are some of the leadership qualities and strategies that you think are essential for doing business through these kind of more difficult and uncertain economic situations to help achieve some sustainable or even attainable growth?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that one of the things that has been harder to kind of grasp and learn and be successful during, especially called the last 4 years specifically, is that we used to have predictability. We used to be able to look at like trend lines and really understand what things we're going to, what we're going to have. We were looking at year over year growth. We were looking at things like that. We can't do that anymore. Everything is pretty arbitrary and relative to real-time market conditions. So I would say that the number one thing is like setting realistic goals, but those goals cannot be based on year over year growth. They can't be based on quarter over quarter growth, even at this point in time. They have to be determined based on what the actual market potential is in real time today. And I think that that's been a tougher thing to get everybody to wrap their head around. We used to go from forecasting. I remember, call it 10 years ago, we would forecast on a yearly basis. What are we going to do for the year? We'd set it, forget it, and we'd shoot for those goals. At this point in time, I reforecast our business every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, I have to reforecast our business. Some days, some months it's up, some months it's down, but it is relative to what is going on in the market right now. It's not an arbitrary want. It is what is going on in the market right now and how can we capitalize on the overall potential of what's there in real time. So I would say that's a big one. Another thing that I would say is transparency. So transparency, I think that sometimes when we're setting arbitrary goals or non-arbitrary goals, if there's a rhyme, there should be a rhyme to the reason, no matter what. But I think that a lot of times leaders just kind of set those goals and expect for everybody to be along for the ride, and they don't tell them the why. Why are we doing this? Why do we need to do this? What does this mean for our long-term growth and health? And so I think that transparency, if anybody is on this call that reports into me, I'm sure that transparency is probably my number one most used leadership skill. Decisiveness and speed are two other ones that I would say. Like, sometimes we sit too much, sit too long, and we never make those decisions quick enough. And then we kind of miss the boat on those. Those are the ones that come to mind.
Those are great. I mean, analysis paralysis is absolutely real. And I think in a time when we are all very much feeling a sense of uncertainty and fear, it's easy to kind of withdraw from those, kind of that desire to be more active or more kind of like, let's make this happen faster. And I do agree. I mean, I love that idea of real goals in real time, because you're right. I mean, as a business owner myself, it's so hard. It's almost heartbreaking to look at year over year data, because it's not what it was before the pandemic. And now with the economy the way that it is, you really have to be able to meet your team, your customers, everything kind of where they are in real time. So that's fantastic advice for sure.
I would say even from the decisiveness standpoint, I think that we've had to employ a little bit more of a gut feeling just to move quicker. And so whereas like before we would have all the data in the world, we'd have everything that we knew we're going to, we'd have these trend lines that we would go towards. Now it's like, do you have 70% of the equation? And if so, make a decision, make a decision and move. And I think that that's one of those things that people don't understand is like that decision tree is not a right or wrong answer. It's a better and best answer. And those are relative to the information that you have at the time. And once you make that decision, it's not a forever decision. I mean, most of our decisions are not. You can change course, but you have to make a decision. The only wrong choice is standing still.
Yes. 100% agree with that. As a business right now, especially standing still, it is easy to think like, we'll just coast, we'll wait it out, things will go back to normal. And I'm using my air quotes for those of you who are just listening. We all hopefully have realized at this point there's really no such thing. And I think the last thing, I love that you spoke to transparency, because again, if you're looking at creating real goals in real time and, taking action faster and sooner, like if you're not being transparent, is anybody going to move with you? Probably not. So
That
I
is
think
so
it's a
true.
fantastic part of the equation, is that transparency, it's not just that people want it because they want to know every little thing. It's because they really do need it, because things do feel unclear and uncertain. And without that transparency, they're just going to plant their feet and they're not going to move and you
Hmm.
need them to move. So I love it.
Yeah.
Fantastic answer. Could you share some other practical tips on how businesses can navigate and maintain strong relationships with their vendors during these times? Because obviously, vendors, when things get kind of tough, that's usually kind of an area in which we start to look at and make changes.
Yeah. I hate to be repetitive, but transparency.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, I think that like that's where we've seen the most success is
Hmm.
when our clients are transparent with us and we're transparent with our clients about what's going on, where the needs are, and what they need help with.
Hmm.
We're there to get fill whatever they need. And so I think that whenever you have businesses that are either in denial about, missing capabilities, or just so strong-headed and we have to do this ourselves and we're not going to ask for help. I mean, this is like speaking to the choir as a mom. I feel like that's like the one thing I never do is ask for help. And
Uh-huh.
when I ask for help, it's so much easier. It's so much easier.
Hmm.
And so, I think that if we just had absolute transparency with our partners
Hmm.
and they were vulnerable, we've had like advertising agencies specifically, they've really invested in their own in-house technologies and, they want those to be the best in market.
Yeah.
Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. And sometimes they get under resourced, sometimes they get underfunded. There are gaps, no doubt about it. If they're able to transparently and vulnerably give that information about where their gaps are,
Yep.
we come in and we're like that mortar that goes within the bricks. They have the bricks, we're the
Hmm.
mortar. We're the thing that makes it
Yeah.
stronger and help them to really succeed. But if we don't know where they need mortar, we don't know where that needs to happen, it's a lot
Hmm.
harder for us to pinpoint exactly how to help. So I do think that, especially during this time, I call it again 4 years ago, everyone had like a game face on. We have the best technology in the world. We have
Yeah.
no gaps. We have no downfalls whatsoever. Fast forward to now, they're like, we need help. Like, we need
Yeah.
analytics. We need data scientists. We need traders. We need resource in general. We need help with business pitches, like everything. And everyone has a bespoke need. And so it's been nice to be able to kind of help. But again, those best partners have been the transparent ones.
That's great. You mentioned resources. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit then in our questions. How do you recommend businesses approach the decision-making process when it comes to allocating resources and determining where their focus should be in times like these? Because obviously you've got your external vendors and then you've got your folks inside. What about them?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that they can do is like just assess your own situation. I think that is like one of those things where you read the trades and you see all these layoffs and you're like, should I be laying
Yeah.
off? And it's like,
Hmm.
you can't follow what everyone else is doing because everyone has a different path. Everyone's situation is incredibly different. It's different. It could be different than what's on the news. It could be different from like what your competitors are doing. And I do think that taking a conservative but objective look at your
Yeah.
business and get a baseline of how that affects you
Hmm.
is the first step. You have to, really understanding your own financial position. What does cash flow look like? Like, what does
Yeah.
it need to look like? All of those things. Really assessing some of the functions or different areas within the business that are like mission critical. Your mission
Hmm.
critical could be very different than someone else's mission critical, right?
Absolutely.
So understanding what is going to help you guys succeed
Hmm.
versus like your competitor may not have the same vulnerabilities or differences there. I absolutely love like doing different scenario plays.
Yeah.
So I like to play those out of like, if this happens, what would happen?
Uh-huh.
I think my boss actually said it best, and this was like more about therapy, but still relative and works. But, have like a worry journal of like, what is the worst thing that could happen based on these specific decisions that I make? And then own it. So you have a game plan if it goes wrong. If it goes the absolute sideways, and you're expecting it already and you have a plan. Let's see. I would also say like efficiencies are always something that I look at. So could we, employ technology to get any additional, efficiencies? Right. Anything in that vein would be a resource that I would bring in to say like, is there any way that we can cut costs and not make it human based? Again, for anybody who has ever been on my team, I think that they'll say I'm probably people first to a fault. But I will look at any line item that I can cut before I cut a person. That's just what I do. So.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And it also makes me think of the thing I'm always saying, which is plan for the worst, hope for the best, because again, you never kind of know what's going to happen. But if you kind of run through those scenarios, one, they just stop sitting in your head and like spinning constantly. And then you do have some plan of action. And if you are providing transparency along the way, then if the worst comes to bear, like the team knows you've got a plan. And they have an understanding of if that plan comes to fruition, what that might even mean, or when it does, they're like, oh, well, yeah, this makes total sense. Like, why would we argue with this? We understand. It's never a great place to be, obviously, when you're managing and running a business or P&L and things like that. And numbers come to speak truth that you don't want to have to deal with. But at the end of the day, I think like you were saying, what kind of doing a more consistent forecasting in uncertain times, plus having those game plans if things should continue to just go to shit, you've got some chance to kind of at least show up composed and you're not totally blindsided, which is, I think, even harder to do is, as a leader, when you are blindsided by things and you don't feel like you have a plan and you don't feel like you have an answer. Not that you have to have an answer as a leader, but that can be a very precarious situation to be put in, and you're taking a volatile situation and making it more volatile by not being prepared. So I think all of that is a lot of great advice, of course.
Well,
so when it comes to strategic decisions, how important is it for a business to embrace a data-driven approach and leverage insights to drive growth when things are a bit rocky as they are now?
Oh, that's another great question. You have all the good questions. They're not easy answers, to be quite honest. Right. I mean, I feel like these are things that are on a spectrum completely, and there's different ways that we can look at this. So I would say in general, the data-driven approach that I would look at is it all comes down to accountability for me. And when you said, the data shows you things that are sometimes hard truths, like the data doesn't lie. And that is what it is. Like, it's all about the accountability. And I think that sometimes whenever times are not so tough, we have the ability to like lean into risk a little bit more without feeling like the world's like on our shoulders. Right. When things are not so great, like every single dollar has to drive results. Like there is no, in between there. And then I think that the other just thing that I would say is that like what has always worked from a data-driven standpoint may not work when things change. The insights of yesterday are not going to be like the insights of tomorrow. Like you may be going down that path that you think it's right because it's always worked in the past, but you're not kind of looking at that guide in front of you to take you where you need to be. And that guide is your data, that guide is that's your insights. I'm going to try to strangely put this into terms. I'm new to Colorado. And I keep thinking about like hiking, like I love hiking. And, I'm still finding my way out there, and I'm definitely on the trail. Like you're not going to find me off the trail at this point, which is totally fine. But it's like, I know how to get to my certain summits. I know how to get to my certain points. And so every single time that I'm going, I'm following the same trail, same path. You got climate change, you got wildfires, you've got flooding, you have all the stuff that comes in. All of those things can change your path. And if you're not looking at those from a data standpoint, you're going to be hiking through the woods, crossing new rivers, going through burnt fields whenever there could be another path to the summit that you just are missing, right?
Yeah.
And so I do think that like paying attention to those as signals and helping them guide you on your way is the only way to get through this. That's why data and insights are so incredibly important to like your decision making. You have to have those. They may not give you the answer, but they're certainly going to be your guide to getting to the right answer or getting to the spot you want to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. Analogies in hiking. You just made me so happy.
I mean, well, because my Colorado people are going to be so proud. So proud.
Right? I love it. I love it. Yeah, I love hiking as well. The one time I've been out to Denver, I made sure that we did a hike after our summit. But yeah, I think, the analogy is great because it also points out the fact that sometimes it's so easy for us to say, this is the path. This is the way it's always been. This is how you get there. And even when we're looking at data and insights, sometimes it's through the lens of confirmation bias, right? We're just looking to be shown that we're already right. So the confirmation is there's a path in front of me. So clearly this must be the right way to go. But if you're not looking at other data and metrics around you, you might be missing the fact that there's a massive storm coming. There's a wildfire burning, things like that. So I think for me, it's been really interesting through the pandemic is, changing my mindset of the metrics that matter in my business to know that we're growing and growing kind of in the right direction because it's a lot different now than it was pre-COVID, at least for us. Do you get that sense as well? And how do you all kind of come to those certain KPIs? Because again, we love data. We're very data-centric people by nature, being in digital, but sometimes too much data is too much. Do you ever feel that way?
Absolutely. It can be overwhelming, honestly. I do think that like for me though, looking at market potential in real time has been a blessing and a curse because I think that you can showcase and set expectations based on what's available up, but guess what? Down, and managing a team to that is sometimes incredibly hard because sometimes you'll say, hey, market's bearing more than what we thought. Your goal just went up. And they're like, but wait, I just did what you told me to do. Flip side of that is like market's down and we don't expect as much from you. We've been very fortunate in MiQ specifically to be on that upside, which we were not expecting. I have to be honest. When COVID happened and even going into this latest recession, we have been very conservative we understand the tech field. We see the layoffs in the news. We see other financials all the time. And we have been incredibly fortunate. And I think that, again, it comes to the agility. It comes to setting the right expectations. It comes to conservative growth, not exponential growth at this point. And it's been great to see the company be so responsive, not reactive, but responsive to the markets, and anticipating the markets and having plans that help us to get there and navigate through it. All of those have felt really comforting at the company, to be very frank.
Well, because you're letting the data lead the way, but then it's like you're also letting that ebb and flow happen, which I think is another post-pandemic thing that companies need to become more aware of, is that people don't want to be in a company that's growth at all costs, which means massive burnout, people laid off, people hired back in, like constant turnover, overly ambitious goals that aren't reflective of the market or the industry currently, just because they want to be the best, to do the best. It's like, that's not what's going to happen. I think what was so small but significant that you said there was, when the market's hot, we get out there, we raise the goals. When it cools off, we cool off and we take a moment and we step back. So giving your people time to kind of react and respond in that way will help them come back that much stronger versus being, pedal to the metal all the time. I think there's a lot of people who, you talk about the quiet quitting and a lot of people just leaving their jobs outside of people getting laid off or trying to find a new job. It has a lot to do with that previous COVID mindset, in my opinion, that had a lot to do with this growth at any cost and, be damned work-life balance. We all had it didn't love it, but we had it all to the nth degree and during shutdown, and we actually learned to appreciate slowing down. And I think we need to work that into, how we guide our teams, how we look and review the data to know when and where and how we can take a moment to just pause because we need it.
And I would also say too, like one of the best parts about like the managing directing role is that I have insight and leverage over every function. And so, I think that's one of those things that I would also, I guess, give as a tip is get somebody who can pull different levers. Like your sales team is not the only person who can bring in revenue to your company, right? And I think that the sales team always like gets that brunt of like sales are down, get out, go sell, right? So with us, we don't do that. We all take different proportions of responsibility at different times, depending on what's going on in the market. So if the market's hot and the salespeople can be out and selling, great. They're going to be holding the larger piece of the responsibility of bringing in revenue. If the market has slowed down a little bit, then it's about taking market share, right? So there's still the same amount of money in the marketplace, but they're not getting any more. How can we get our internal client services team to over service those accounts and steal share, like share in the market? If neither of those two things are working, we also have our trading practice and which we can help them to find more efficiencies to get a larger profit margin out of the back end. And so I can pull different levers at different times, depending on what I have and what's going on in the market. I don't just have like a one trick pony, like sales are down, get out there, sales team. You really have to look at it as a real machine, something that you can pull different strings at different times, depending on what you have and what's going on in the market.
I love it. That's great. That's wonderful. I think just sounds like a great place and person to work for when you've got that kind of a mindset. So that's like one example of a pitfall. What are some other common pitfalls or mistakes that businesses should avoid making when navigating these challenging times?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like the only thing that comes to my the forefront of my mind right now is Twitter. Twitter is
best case example.
The best case example. I mean, cut it totally. Like you cut costs without looking at implications. You just make these like rash decisions that you have no idea what the long-term and short-term effects are, but it sounds good in the moment. So you just do it. I don't know. Twitter just comes to mind. But I think that comes to the overreacting, also not bouncing back if you make the wrong decision. Like there are ways that you can make the wrong decision. That is totally fine. I said that earlier. You can make a wrong decision, but what you can't do is like make no decision. Like indecision is a bad choice. So overreacting, but then kind of turning around and quickly fixing it would be something. Another thing that I would say is there's red flags everywhere, and some people like to just put their head under a pillow and be like, I don't see it. I don't want to look at it. And so really kind of, you don't have to react to the red flags, but you have to know that they're there. You have to notice them and see what's going on. Cutting crucial budgets. So whenever I think about this, innovation is one thing that you don't want to let up on during times like this, because these are the times whenever you have to distinctly put yourself in the market. And if you're pausing on innovation, someone else can outpace you in the market, which is not great. Marketing T&E, you still have to see clients, you still have to market, people still need to know who you are. So those are areas that seem like the first to be cut off of a P&L. However, I think that they're actually crucial for keeping on. And so, I have seen that kind of be a pitfall during these times for sure.
Those are fantastic points. And I agree with you. As much as it sucks, failure is a part of doing business. If you're not trying to, no business ever made it anywhere by not failing, it's just, that's how you figure things out. Maybe unless you're Twitter, who knows? We're waiting to see how that saga ends. And then I agree with you wholeheartedly. Innovation is when times are tough, that is the time to innovate. If you think about a lot of the breakout brands in the industry, across industries and time, when things got really hard, when they were close to falling and failing hard to the point of closing, innovation is often the thing that saved them. And so it is really mind-boggling to me when companies look at things like innovation to cut from a P&L, or even marketing. I feel like that's another area. Marketing always seems to get cut. We've actually had a few members recently who their companies, they're a one person marketing show and they literally do all the marketing for the company and then they let them go. And I'm like, well, how do you expect to gain new clients or
Right.
sell more product if you're not marketing or if you're not innovating to reach new markets? It
Yes.
just
And
breaks my brain.
the other thing that really I struggle with so much whenever those marketing budgets get cut is
Mhm.
that short term, they look amazing, right? We
Yeah,
cut all this money, we're still getting clients, we made the right choice. It's valid, it's validating the wrong behaviors because it is a short-term fix that does not result in a long-term gain. So what
agree.
happens is now you have lag time of the
Mhm.
marketing that you did have in market that is bringing in the bottom of your funnel of people that you had. You've got
Yep.
nobody else that's filling the top of the funnel, and call it 3 to 6 months down the road, you have
Yep.
no new clients and you have to start over. Right.
Mhm.
And so I think that marketing as a short-term fix is
Yeah,
so painful as a long-term impact.
I
And
agree.
I don't understand how people have not figured that out. It blows my mind. It's like
Same.
marketing 101.
Yeah, I think it's marketing 101, but it's the people who are not in marketing or don't understand the function of marketing and the value that it brings to see it until, 3, 6 months down the line. And then all of a sudden, whoops, where's all of our revenue? Like all of a
Yeah.
sudden our bottom line's being impacted. Well, it has to be something else. It can't be marketing because we already cut that.
Right. Right.
I don't understand it either. It does seem so obvious, but then we're in that space in that industry. But I appreciate you commenting on it because like I said, a number of our members and Together Digital, the community itself are in that space. And, outside of the tech jobs, the marketing jobs have also been pretty heavily impacted thanks to the current economy. Could you provide us some real life examples of businesses that have not only survived but thrived during these sorts of times? And what strategies and initiatives do you believe have kind of helped them to succeed? I was thinking of a few as I was just talking, but I was like, I want to get to the
Mhm.
question next, and then maybe I'll share some too.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like any company that has been notable and one of these big giants, if you will, have
Mhm.
happened in times of disruption. Times of disruption breed innovation. I think about
Mhm.
things like modern day, you're looking at the Ubers and
Yep.
Airbnbs and Slack even.
Yeah.
And even prior to this, looking at the big giants like a Microsoft and Apple. I mean, Apple was almost bankrupt and now they're the biggest company in the world, like Google,
Mhm.
literally every single one of these I feel like giants are born out of disruption.
Mhm.
And, you can look at any of the ones that are here today and all of those kind of follow that same kind of footprint.
Mhm.
One thing that I will say is, I haven't been at a big company like that during those times of,
Right.
disruption, but I have been at a lot of startups during these times of
Mhm.
disruption. And I think that the approach that I have seen that's really worked in kind of getting into that next step or kind of surviving and thriving post is agility. Again, we talked about this a lot today, but
Mhm.
having the ability to switch course based on market conditions and not be paralyzed is really, really important. If you need to switch
Mhm.
course, you have to do it in real time. And again, you
Yep.
can switch back too. It's not like you're switching forever, but you kind of have to be part of the river that's flowing and go in the directions where the current is, and find your way downstream. I'm using so many good analogies that are so
You
outdoorsy.
are,
I'm super proud of
right?
myself.
I'm so
Um,
proud of you too.
I think that the other thing would be just human emphasis.
Mhm.
To me, I think people are your number one and best asset, people and
Yeah.
product. If you don't have those two things, you're not,
Mhm.
you're probably not a successful company or long-term success. But the people in general, those are your most valuable assets. So
Yep.
when you think about the people that you have, it's really important to understand how to deploy them in the right way for the real-time needs of the company. You may have to
Mhm.
shift somebody's role. You may have to shift a department's function. I mean, again, you kind of think about what was it? Ford was making face masks and stuff during
Yeah.
COVID. I mean,
Uh-huh.
how, that's innovation. That is
Yeah.
agility. That's the human emphasis. That's keeping jobs. That's pushing the need towards what the company needs to be successful. I do think you need to keep the business and the people in mind though. So, you know, that you can't just kind of keep people to keep people. If you have a business need to utilize them in, finding efficiencies elsewhere is good too. We talked about innovation, but like continuing to invest in product is incredibly important. You can't pull that out. I mean, I just think that, and clear communication, like is another one, like having that transparency, having clear communication, having the ability to kind of give people a roadmap of what to expect is amazing. So I can give you a good example of that at MiQ. So we did this thing called Project Unity post, when COVID just essentially happened. We saw all these other companies essentially shutting their doors, laying off people, like just absolute mayhem. And we said, we don't want to lose one person at this company, like, especially at this time, like they couldn't get another job. There was just no way. So instead, we all decided collectively to take a 15% pay cut. And we did the pay cut until we didn't have to anymore, to make sure that not one person got let go during that time. And we thought we were going to have to do it for like 6 months to a year. We weren't really sure. 3 months later, we were thriving and everyone got full payback. And it was just one of those things where it was such an innovative thing to make sure that we as a business survived, but also that the people survived. That there was nobody that was put in a really bad situation during something that none of us have ever experienced.
Yep. That's beautiful. I love that. I mean, that's always the thing that comes to mind for me first. It's like, why aren't we looking at executive salary? I hate to say it, but 15% for a shorter period of time versus somebody losing 100% of their salary who is probably making less. Like it's just, to me, it's like, I don't know why it's, I guess, again, because I'm a mission-based business, small business owner. So, you know, I have to play that part in that role quite often. And I guess in organizations, there's a different mindset maybe as to who they are and what they do. But I love that. That's so beautiful. And I wish more businesses would do that, because how many people you were able to save from that. And again, you were able to get back up and running when things started to return to normal, because you still had that holistic team. And also that breeds loyalty. I mean, so many people complain about this quiet quitting and resentful workers who don't want to show up and do the work. It's not true. Like, they do want to. It's just they want to know that you're going to meet them halfway, that when things get really hard, you're going to take some of the brunt of what's hard. And it's not just them that's going to kind of come down to. And I love this idea of, you know, sharing that roadmap. I think it is so important as you're making sudden changes in the midst of change itself or uncertainty, you know, helping paint a picture for people. It's so necessary to have that psychological safety so that they can focus on the jobs at hand and do what they do best versus stressing and worrying about what's to come and how things are going to work. Because that is the role that leadership plays. They continue to, you know, consistently look at that map, make the revisions, but then you're getting the buy-in. And when you're getting the buy-in from them, it makes it so much easier to kind of push ahead and move forward. Something else you said earlier too, and that reminded me of this idea too of, you know, love the problem, not the product that you provide. Always stay in love with the problem, because if you're focused on and in love with the problem that you're trying to solve, you're always going to be very consumer centric. You're going to be focused on your customers versus, oh, look, we have this amazing product that does X, Y, and Z. And then the person over here is going, I don't need any of that. I don't want any of that. You know, so falling in love with the problem versus the product, I thought was a great piece of advice, and something you kind of started to get at there as well.
Yeah. And I will tell you that psychological safety was everything about Project Unity. I mean, people can take a 15% pay cut for a short period of time and generally be fine. You know, nobody was going out to dinner. So like, that was my dinner budget. It was gone, right? Like, totally fine. You know, but it went from the top of the company down to the bottom of the company. It was every single person in it together, unity. And what it did was, again, like you said, it was like, no one was thinking, do I not have a job tomorrow? No one was thinking that, because we laid it out and we said, not one person will lose their job, no matter what. No matter what, we've done this so that no one loses their job. And so people were able to focus on the job.
I love it. Yeah, that buy-in and that sense of psychological safety, and even sort of, you know, when you make those kinds of stands, the one I was thinking of, because I've been listening, I love How I Built This, another podcast. If you haven't listened to it before, whether or not you're an entrepreneur, it's a great series of episodes to listen to. I was listening to the Noom founders, Seju Jong. And one of the things they talked about was when they were down to like $2,000 in the bank, they had no more financing. Like everybody else is like, don't come to us for money. Like we're not, there were no more venture capital, all of this. But they knew where the direction that they wanted to go. And it was different than where they were at the time. And so they sat like the 50 people down that they had. And we're like, listen, this is our direction. This is where we're headed. This is where we need you to come along with us. But if you're not in this place and you're not willing and able to go along with us, then we understand. And so like, it was crazy, but like several of the people like that they weren't really expecting walked out, but then the people that were there were so bought in that they were actually able to scale and continue to grow the business to which now, if any of you don't know, I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar company. Noom is, it's like a diet platform that works with cognitive behavioral therapy almost to kind of help you work through your weight loss and health type of things. And they were able to scale and grow because they knew that the people were there were the ones that wanted to be there, that were there for the reasons. And they loved the problem, not just the product. That was the thing. There were some certain people that were like, but this is what the product is, and this is what it should always be. Versus all of a sudden now the problem we're trying to solve. This isn't the product to solve the problem. We need to try something different. So that one was a really interesting one. And it wasn't even during tough economic times. I think this was in like the mid 2000s that they were just like, oh, wow, we need to make a change. It was more based on what they had in the bank than anything else. But that was another great example of just, pivoting and bringing people along. And sometimes if they don't feel it's right, letting them make the choice so that you don't have to.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. We've talked about innovation and how it can help overcome economic challenges and maintain competitive advantage. So I'm going to actually skip that question unless you had something else you wanted to add there, because I feel like we covered that quite a bit.
I mean, I guess from an innovation lens, the only thing I would say is innovation does not have to equal new. Innovation can be better efficiencies and productivity for your company as you're already doing it. So I feel like when people hear innovation, they're like, I have to put money into something new. Like that's not necessarily it. We also need to look at what we're currently doing. Can we innovate anything on our in our current back end to make things more efficient? And those are just as helpful.
That's a great point. Yeah. I love process and innovating on it because it's like, why are we doing it this way? Is it the right way to do it? Is it the fastest, cheapest way to do it? Maybe not. I love that. It's a good point. Great call out. I'm glad I mentioned it then. Okay. Balancing short-term survival tactics with long-term growth strategies can be pretty tricky. Do you have any advice for businesses on how to find that balance and ensure sustainable growth?
Yeah. So whenever I think about this, I always think about like people who have a wedding and need to squeeze into a dress, but they've been like not working on that for years. And it's like, I've got to get into I'm a size 10 and I need to get in size 2 by next weekend. Right. Like, I think that it's hard because if you're trying to implement short-term impact, but you haven't done the maintenance prior, you're going to have a lot harder time. So like things like performance management and making sure your product roadmap is super tight on like clear, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 opportunities. Like you have to utilize and run a smart and efficient and lean business in order to make short-term cuts that don't seem super drastic. Because if you are following the market and being, again, responsive, not reactive, as a business, you're running it so that it is a well-oiled machine that has the right parts and you don't have like a lot of extra junk sitting around and things like that. Technically, those short-term changes should not be that painful. I think that whenever the short-term changes get really, really hard is when you haven't done the maintenance. There's no maintenance. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, recession, oh, COVID. And wow, I just realized that I have 50% fat in my company. That is painful. And that looks bad in a market because you're doing these massive layoffs and things like that. But they're not necessarily reflective of the market. They're reflective of a poorly run business. And so I think that that's one of the harder things for me to swallow is like, I think that if companies focused more on maintenance and having
Mhm.
good hygiene as a
Yeah.
business, that these short-term, changes that we need to make
Mhm.
are not actually going to be as painful.
Yeah. It looks a lot less knee jerk. And we talked earlier about psychological safety, how much more of that provides to the team and the people that you need to continue to work when things get challenging and difficult. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Maintenance is something I think that goes underrated because, like you said, the shiny object is often innovation.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, we've got to make all these significant cuts, in costs or labor or vendors, and it looks unstable and it
Yeah,
feels unstable
right.
versus kind of keeping those tabs on the right kinds of metrics and things that you need to be moving on and constantly looking at and improving, like you said earlier too, your process to
Yeah.
make sure that when you need to become more agile, it's not like you said, it's not like trying to get into that size 2 by the weekend.
Yeah, and I think that pace is also another lever that you can always pull. And I don't think that
Mhm.
people always realize that too. They think it's a start and stop.
Yeah.
Like economic times really bad, hiring freeze. How many times have you heard of hiring freeze? Like happens all the time.
Uh-huh.
Hiring freeze is not a smart choice in my opinion. I think what is a
Mhm.
better choice is slow hiring and hire mission critical roles.
Mhm.
Like that seems like a better strategy than, again, you kind of signal panic when you do these like
Yeah.
start stops and things like that. And it's not good for anybody. It's not good for the markets. It's not good for the company morale. It's not good for psychological safety. It's not good for your overworked teams that are understaffed. Like it's not good for any
Yeah.
of that stuff. So just remember that pace is also another lever that you can always pull.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I had somebody once tell me, and I'm curious how you feel about it. It was hire slow, fire fast.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I was like,
Um,
oh, that makes me uncomfortable for the firing part of it, but I totally understand it.
yeah. I mean, if only that was like in real practice, like
Yeah.
a thing.
Yeah.
But I do think that, I don't know, it's my Achilles heel. I'm a people first person. I give
Yep.
people
It
like
is very hard.
so much of the benefit of the doubt, and yeah,
Uh-huh.
and it's really, really tough. But I think that
Right.
when you can objectively look at it, put it,
Yes.
you don't want, I'm not a spreadsheet manager. I don't like say like you're below the red line kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if you consistently can pull out underperformance, again,
Mhm.
it's about that management of that. It's about, that is a process within a process. That is the
Yeah.
machine that makes this whole machine work.
Mhm.
And it's, yeah, it's tough. It's a hard one.
It is. It is. I agree. But I would like fast is relative, right? For me, like I
Yeah.
would never just make a sudden decision like that. Like it would be a very data informed and thoughtful and intentional, where it's like I'm looking at the numbers and they're showing me those scary, ugly truths that like, numbers or data points, like you
Yeah.
said, if there's underperformance issues and things like that, that it's like, I can't let this drag on for so long because I think that's why I was getting that advice is because I'm the same, Sam. Like I'm so people centric. I will give every person every chance and all the benefit of the doubt. I want to coach them. I want to help them grow and
Mhm.
succeed. I don't get off on making people feel like shit and firing them. I never have,
So
never
true.
will. So fast for me is maybe is like medium for
Yeah.
others, but
Yeah.
I don't want to be rash either because I definitely believe in not burning bridges, being intentional about the choices that I'm making and how they're being communicated. Because you're talking about a team change, and
Yeah.
that's going to impact your team as well. So I think there's like there's a happy medium that I get a little. That's my excuse for not being quite so fast, but it's
You and
fast for
I,
me.
you and I are in the same boat. I'm a higher, what was it? Higher, slow, and
Hire slow, fire fast.
fire
Yeah,
medium. Yeah. Or
yeah,
fire medium.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm in there. I'm in that boat with you.
Awesome. Are there any particular industries or sectors that you believe are maybe a better position to thrive during these times? And
Mm.
what can other businesses learn from some of the success that they've seen? I mean, you kind of mentioned like the Ubers of the world and Airbnb and things like that. Is there any others you can think of
Yeah.
sector wise?
So I think that was like one of those things too, where again, when the world was falling apart and, we're still slowly crumbling, but we're figuring it out.
Yeah.
I think that everybody thought that everything crumbles, like everything's going to crumble, everything's going to shit, nothing's going to, kind of survive. And we didn't see that. What we saw was that, especially things like education specifically, that was one
Mm,
that actually thrived really, really
yeah.
well. I think that when we have these times of uncertainty, people are kind of looking to enhance their skills. They want to be more marketable. They understand that, maybe their job skills are not going to be what people are looking for. And so we saw, like, as far as like our education clients specifically, we saw so many different people of different life stages coming into that funnel, and education just exploded, which I think that intuitively, I think, well, people don't want to spend more money. So why would they go back to school? But I think that, I don't know, psychologically, they were like, I need to be more marketable and I need to go back to school. So it was an investment for sure in that. And so that was surprising, but also I felt is also going to continue. We're seeing, again, just like a different subset of people that are going into education. Other sectors that I think that actually grew, and I don't know, I have mixed feelings on this, but pharma. I think that people had a chance to self-reflect and do have a chance to self-reflect whenever things are so incredibly crazy out there. It's like, what can I control? I can control my health, and I can control my health through like additional healthcare and or prescription medication. And so we saw both of those two sectors absolutely skyrocket as well. So I think that, as a part of it, from a strategy of like learning what success is, it's like about smart anticipation. It's about really trying to anticipate what consumer behavior will be like, and how do you fit into that behavior, or at least try to market yourself to fit into what you think that behavior will be. So it's a psychological thing, I think, more than anything. And that's a really tough, that's a tough thing to understand, anticipate for, and also to really, put effort around, because you have to make a bet, and it could be wrong. But again, that's where the agility comes in to shift if needed.
Absolutely. Those are both great industries, and you're 100% spot on with both of them. I mean, I can speak from the education standpoint, specifically running a community of women who are chronic and constant learners. I was blown away that while it seemed like the whole world was burning down, we were having our existing members and new members coming in all the time that were looking to gain and grow their knowledge, their skills, their networking. And I'm like, wow, the whole world's going to hell in a handbasket. And you're like, how can I improve myself professionally? How can I improve myself personally? This is why I love just women's nature in that respect, was just like, they're like, here's what I can control. I can control what I know, what I understand. If the market goes crazy, if I lose my job, I'm just going to do what I can to get certifications, newer knowledge, better networking. And so while I was sitting on the other side of things thinking, holy hell, we're not going to have any in-person events for God knows how long. And this is what we were built on. Instead, our community online grew and flourished, and we provided workshops and certifications and all these different things that were meeting the women where they were and with what they needed, and with a space that provided psychological safety through our peer groups and through our Slack channels, where we just do a lot of vulnerable conversation. So if they weren't getting that at work, we were helping to fulfill that need and culture. So I definitely saw sort of that like psychological shift in women. Now we're back to trying to run everything in the world and aren't making as much time for ourselves as we should be. So y'all, that's your homework for the weekend. Please make some time for yourself. Connection is also self-care, but also having time to yourself to think through things and plan is also a great way to go. We did have one question from our live listening audience from Miranda. She says, hello, you've talked about some creative ideas to address problems in your business that were highlighted because of the market. As a leader, can you share tangible examples of how you've had to foster that creativity? Personally, I'm curious how to foster that creativity within a company I work for. Thank you, Miranda. Great question.
Yeah, thank you, Miranda. And thanks for joining in live. We really appreciate it. I think that I will do anything to kind of bring creativity to the forefront, because I'm a super creative person and I don't actually get to be creative that much in my job. So one thing that I have done that has kind of helped bridge the gap between like personal and professional life is I'll host vision board sessions for our team. And it's like, what do you want to accomplish both professionally and personally? And it kind of helps them to like mesh their whole brain together of like, this is how I can adapt myself and reach my goals as a holistic person, not just like at work or at home, because everyone is a whole person. You might laugh, but I do think that having just health in general is another way that people can stop from the tacticalness of the job and get into their own creative brains. And so I just hosted a sound bath in our office.
I love it.
Very Denver. It's very Denver of me. But I do think that it's just getting people to get out of that grind, of that cog every single day and the same stuff, and just have a chance to use their brains in different ways. And if you put in that effort for your team and give them the time to separate from work, it pays dividends back in the workplace. I've also done things where I've kind of added in creativity within different sessions. So I hired an artist to do it was like a whole strategy session. We were doing our strategy for the following year. And I hired an artist that sat on the side and listened to everything that we did and created beautiful bubbles and like art. And it showcased our entire plan, but in a visual sense, because some people are not, auditory learners, some people are visual learners, and some people really like that, that they had something to reference that they could look at that was visually appealing. So I do think that there's things that you can integrate within the workplace that just get people out of the grind, get people out of the wheel that they're on every day, that help to foster that creativity.
I love that. Yeah. Breaking kind of those typical, it's easy for our brains to shortcut to cycles, right? We want efficiencies. We want to not have to think about things, but giving people space, like deliberate space and opportunity. I do miss that. I always loved blue skying, and not just blue skying, just to say like, if it's more like, okay, we did one recently in a cohort I was part of, and it's like, okay, if you had $10,000, what would you do for your business? Where would you spend that money? And then it was like, if you had $50,000, then it was like, if you have $50,000, there's like $5 million. And it was so funny to where like your brain starts to go when you remove barriers and limits. So that could be another fun exercise, is like, think about what are the barriers and limits, like the client saying no. What if the client said yes to whatever you proposed? What would you actually propose? Another fun one I've had is like, what is the worst idea you could think of? What is the worst thing that you could think would never work? And then we often talk about how would we actually take that and make it work? And it was some of our most innovative work that we had done, because it was basically like, we're just, again, mentally removing those barriers that, are keeping us, that are holding us back from having truly innovative, inspired, and new ideas. And I also think the fact that a lot of people, especially in the industry, I feel like in advertising and marketing in particular, I was a former creative director. So, there's all this stigma about creatives and ego, which I really didn't have a whole lot of tolerance for any of that. Everyone is creative. I'm married to an applied mathematician, and he is brilliant and creative. He doesn't acknowledge it. It wasn't something he was told as a kid. He's told you're smart, you're intelligent. I was encouraged and poured into as somebody who was creative. So, we're the yin and the yang, but I have learned that, I'm smart, I'm intelligent, and he's learned he is creative. So I think helping to foster creativity, even from those who don't have creative titles, is really important, because you never know where some of your best ideas are going to come from.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome. Well, we are right at the hour, Sam. That went super fast. Thank you for the question, Miranda. And thank you all of you for listening in live. This was a great conversation. I hope you all found some new information and inspiration, that you feel empowered to get out there and, keep on trying. If you fail fast, get back up, keep trying again.
Amazing. And thank you, Amy, for hosting this amazing series. It's been so good to be a part of the organization, as well as this podcast. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you again. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.